Hello lads, lassies, and those of unspecified gender, it's the Irishman here, and today I'm going to be talking about what would have happened if Bardock had achieved the legendary power of the Super Saiyan God transformation against Frieza. This is the second part to this what if, and if you haven't seen the first, I would greatly recommend checking that out first. A link to that will be in the description down below. And this part obviously builds off of the last one, so if you haven't seen it, you probably should, that way you can understand fully what's going on here. But if you'd rather just watch this all the way through and then go back and watch that some other time, I won't judge you. Now before getting into the story, if you could please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, that way you're notified whenever any new videos come out, even the third part to this what if, that would be greatly appreciated. Now, without further ado, let's get into the story of this what if. Where last we left off, Bardock had begun his fated battle with Chilled. Seemingly relating to Frieza, Bardock would be enraged, and using this rage to his benefit, he would begin to land various hits on Chilled, but they do nothing. He would even begin to mock the Saiyan for how weak he seemingly is. And then Bardock would tap into a slight bit of power as his hair would flash red for a moment, landing a kick on Chilled that would send him miles away, and would damage him, well, severely, but not enough to change the tide of the battle. Chilled would then shoot forward before landing a hit of his own straight across Bardock's face, saying that he's not sure how Bardock was able to damage him so, but it must have just been a lucky shot. And then, as the battle would continue, Bardock is on the back foot. And then, eventually, Chilled would raise into the air, saying,
"Your pitiful attempt at trying to challenge me has not only cost you your own life, but also the lives of all those you attempt to defend. Die, monkey!"
But then, as Bardock hears those last few words, "Die, monkey!" they would ring through his head. He would remember Frieza, he would remember everything that had happened, and he would remember his home planet being destroyed. Everybody he cared about died. It was all because of Frieza. And this, in Bardock's eyes, this man is Frieza. And so then, as he would yell out,
"You're going to pay for this, Frieza!"
he would launch at Chilled with his hair spiked red as a death ball would be sent flying towards him, but Bardock would phase through it, grabbing Chilled by the neck and telling him,
"Call me that one more time."
You're nothing but a filthy monkey!
As Chilled would say this, Bardock would clench his throat with even more force before beginning to crush it. And then he would slam Chilled on the ground, dragging him through the rocky terrain of the planet before tossing Chilled into the air, shooting a riot javelin at him, instantly killing the Frost Demon. Bardock would then be hailed as a hero of Planet Plant, as a very large statue would be erected of him, honoring his heroism. Bardock would try and live a life of normality, but it's difficult when he's a person who is just thrusted into a completely different time period, which is something he would learn after a decent amount of time. Bardock would then travel around the galaxy, not wanting to stay on Planet Plant. He would use the ship that Chilled had brought with him to the planet, and he would go out in search of something that's at least a little familiar. And after a few weeks of searching, Bardock actually would find something familiar. He would find Planet Sadala, which would occupy a large group of Saiyans. Well, not exactly Saiyans, as they haven't evolved into the same battle-hungry warriors we know them as. They're more akin to what Saiyans were like in Universe 6, although just not as advanced. These Saiyans were kind-hearted people who did have abnormally high battle powers, but weren't using them to go around and conquer planets. This is in the time where the Saiyans still lived on planet Sadala, and hadn't yet moved from planet to planet, trying to find a big enough or better place for them to live. They were fine on planet Sadala. It was nice, it was cozy, they had everything they needed. Food, water, and their friends and family to keep them company. And they hadn't yet become a part of Frieza's empire, so they really weren't forced into conflict yet. And when Bardock arrived on the planet, even though he did recognize them as Saiyans, he was actually pleasantly surprised. They were peaceful, and they were enjoying their lives, and they weren't battle-hungry monsters. They were people. Wanting to master the form as well as being capable of doing so because he never rejected the form like his son did, Bardock would remain in Super Saiyan God at all times. It's also a nice way to stay out of anybody's radar, as it's incapable of being sensed or picked up on by scouters, even though it does have an insane amount of power behind it. Much to his surprise, Bardock actually wasn't met with hostility when he arrived on the planet. Instead, people took him in with open arms. People saying how cool he looked and how awesome it was that he had red hair but he still looked like a Saiyan. People would be constantly admiring his red hair and tail and how beautiful of a color it was. But Bardock would always snap back, saying that it's the legendary power of the Super Saiyan. It's not something that's supposed to be looked at as beautiful. It's the legendary rage form of the Saiyan race. Yeah, it still looks cool, but it was achieved through blood, sweat, and tears. It's not something that should be admired, it's something that should be feared. This would only make them admire him more, though, as he seems so cool. He's calm and collected, but he still has that hint of sass and anger behind his words. But they would all pick up on the word Saiyan, thinking that if he's a Saiyan, maybe they could learn this power one day. But seeing their expressions, Bardock would say that's not something that they want to achieve. It took him losing everything to be able to accomplish it, and if he could, he would give it up to have them back. And then they would try and console him, saying, "Oh, it's not his fault, and I'm sure they're in a better place." After a few hours of hanging out with some of the locals and getting accustomed to the Saiyan culture, or the old Saiyan culture, Bardock would ask where the king of the planet was, the king of the Saiyans, and they would explain that they do have a king, and they're sure that Bardock and him will get along well since he's the strongest person there, and he's really strong, like, really strong. But judging by the way the rest of the Saiyans have been, Bardock doesn't expect much. He would then be taken to a palace where he would enter the throne room, where a man would be sitting on a very large throne. He looks bored. Not angry, just bored. His Saiyan blood is pumping ferociously. He wants a proper challenge. These Saiyans, although peaceful, do still enjoy battle, although not in a murderous way as much as in a sports kind of way. The king would gesture to a seat near his own, offering Bardock to sit down, that way the two of them can talk. And talk they would. And then for 20 to 30 minutes, the two of them would just kind of sit there and chat. Not about anything important, just small talk, getting to know each other. And then Bardock would offer to spar with the king, demonstrating his power and getting to see what all the king has to offer. And hearing this, something he has always wanted to hear but never really gotten the offer to do after demonstrating how far ahead he was from all the other Saiyans, the king would agree. And then the two of them would leave the castle, going to a designated battlefield, wherein Bardock would power up into Super Saiyan God, and the king would power up into a yellow-eyed, brown-haired form. The king would have felt the power emanating off of Bardock. Even before he powered up while in his Super Saiyan God state, the king could still feel Bardock's presence, and it was intimidating. So he has to take this seriously if he wants to have a chance at winning. It's still a friendly sparring session, but the king is also incredibly competitive and would want to win, despite also wanting a proper challenge. The two would then clash blows, and it is immediately apparent that Bardock has a huge lead, even though he is holding back considerably. Bardock would then ask if he would rather just have him use his base power instead, but the king would say no. He wants to see Bardock at his best, and even if Bardock has a huge lead, he still wants to fight him at his best. And then the two of them would clash again, and although the king would hit with even more power, Bardock still has a higher lead. he would decide to hold back a little bit more, but then, as they would begin to trade blow for blow and blow for blow, the king would get considerably stronger each attack. This is confusing but intriguing, and Bardock would begin using more and more power to match the king's rapid growth. And then, as the fight would go on, after a while, it would seem as if the two of them are even, but then Bardock would say he's barely even using 5% of his full power, and the king, he would be insulted. He would tell Bardock to use all of his power, not to use any of it at all, and agreeing, Bardock would reply,
Okay, fine, if you insist. I'll show you everything I've got.
And then Bardock would let out a roar, as the Super Saiyan God's power would be coursing through his veins, a violet red aura flowing around him. The king would be in shock. He can't sense the power, but it is insane. He would go to land a hit on Bardock, but the Saiyan God would just catch the king's hand in his fist, then snapping his wrist. He would apologize, not wanting to have gotten that carried away, but at the same time, he did tell him to use everything he had. And then, for possibly the first time in the king's entire life, he would ask Bardock to train him. He had never before asked for training. In fact, he had barely ever even trained a day in his life. He had only relied on the insane growth he got while in battle. But here he was bested, and it was such an unfair gap that it was frankly hilarious. And Bardock, being a bit taken back by this, would actually agree. He has nothing better to do, and this would be helping out his race and his planet. And say that Frieza were to eventually come to this planet in however many years, it'd be better to have a king who is so powerful that Frieza wouldn't even stand a chance. Overjoyed, the king would praise Bardock, saying he was such a noble soul. He was so kind, he was so cool, and Bardock would ask him to stop. He didn't like compliments. But then, the king would bring him back to his home, where he would feed Bardock something even better than compliments. Food, and a lot of it. He would give Bardock a feast, celebrating the arrival of a new friend to the Saiyan Empire. And then, Bardock would... he would like being a part of the Saiyan Empire. It was some good food, and he hadn't ate like this in a while. After stuffing his face for a few hours, Bardock would go to sleep for a few hours. And after waking up, he would go and he would find the king, and the two of them would then begin their training. Bardock would demonstrate how to use this same ki and how the god powers work. He has no idea really how he accomplished getting this power, but if it's possible to teach the king how to do it, then he should be unstoppable, similar to Bardock. After only a few days, the king would actually get a semblance of god ki. While in his Akari form, his eyes would go from being the vibrant yellow to a more calm orange color, with a glint of red every now and again. And while in his base form, his eyes, whenever he was trying to activate God Ki, would get a spark of red whenever he tried. Now, granted, he was a long ways away from actually being able to utilize God Ki fully, but this was still a step in the right direction. And that's where we're going to be ending things for now. I hope you enjoyed, and I certainly had fun making it, and if you would like to show your appreciation, and if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. That way you're notified whenever I release any new anime content. This is, always has been, and always will be the Irishman. Have a nice day. Talk to you later. Bye.